How many of you know Gary Meyer? Gary and his wife Sandy, Gary and Kathy Meyer, his brother Lutheran. Sandy are also missionaries, but their dear parents, Ordell and Walter Meyer, Ordell's still living up in the Cincinnati area, I think, with her daughter Marlis. But I just saw Gary a week ago this morning, and he's been with HCJB Radio. You may remember for years, we haven't done this recently. I guess I'll do it this morning. We often prayed by name for Gary and Kathy and Luther and Sandy out of love for their parents and asking for God to bless their ministry in Ecuador. You know what Gary told me last Thursday? He said, "What a thrill it is, Steve, when I'm over in Ecuador," and this has happened countless times, where some American will come up to me and say, "Gary Meyer, I was at a church in Fort Myers and we prayed for you." And he said, what a terrific shot in the arm that is, to know that there are people across the pond praying for, well, I guess it's not across the pond, but up the road, praying for us. And so I think about the power of prayer. And, you know, this is just so little, it's hardly worth mentioning. It's just, you know, a personal victory, a reassurance to me as I was preparing this message on my way back from visiting my granddaughter in Minneapolis. And our daughter and our granddaughter in tow, one last hug and kiss goodbye at the Hubert H. Humphrey Terminal. And we were 50 minutes early for this flight, all carry on, no problem, right? We look at the board, find out we're at gate number H5. Go up the escalator, and there are 6 lines of people to get through security. 6 lines, as wide as the sanctuary, and nobody's moving. And by the end of the first line, the 50 minutes had dwindled down to 35 minutes already. We had moved one of those 6 lines. And I could tell by the look on Deb's face, she was concerned. I really did. I closed my eyes and I prayed, "Dear Lord, help us. We really need to catch," you know, Sun Country doesn't fly every hour. They don't even fly every day. I needed to catch this flight. And I got out my cell phone and I sent a text message to my son at work at Cargill, and I said, "Please pray. We're stuck in this 6-line thing. It looks like it's a small world at Disney World, the lines." And he texted back and said, "Bummer, Dad. I'll be praying." Well, at the end of the second line, we're down to 27 minutes until the flight leaves. And Deb, in fear and trepidation, leans over and says, "We really need to catch this flight. Would it be all right if we went in front of you?" And you know what they said? "Why, sure, go right ahead." This was not New York now. No offense, but, you know, I don't know that this would happen at RSW. And I sent a text message back to my son Peter, and I said, "We're in the first line. Your prayers worked." And he sent me a text back and said, "Dad, that's what we call Minnesota nice." So I am the recipient of Minnesota nice and God's grace, and we made it back safely and made our flight. I'm very thankful for that. But somebody once defined coincidence as one of God's many little miracles where God remains anonymous. I love that. But I was taught a valuable lesson on Tuesday afternoon. And then to hear Ron Brown, the representative from Mission India, who stopped by to chat. He was in Fort Myers yesterday. I've met with Ron over the last couple of years. And he is the southeastern United States representative for Mission India, works with a lot of different churches, not all of them Lutheran. And he invited me for the umpteenth time to go with Lutheran pastors to India next January, February. So I need to pray about that. He shared with me that just recently, I don't know if it was last week, very recently, Cheery, one of the full-time missionary staff members that I met in Arizona 6 years ago at a Mission India conference for Lutheran pastors. Rather than taking everybody to India, they brought 2 of the missionaries from India, local pastor missionaries, to the United States. And Cheery had learned that in one of these 7 of the 30 states of India, have laws against conversion. You may not proselytize. The nation is 80% of the 1.2 billion people are Hindu. And they fear that India may become a Christian nation with their marvelous conversion rate. And so many of these provinces or states, 7 of them, had these laws. And one of these 7, there was a church planter, a missionary who was working to start a new congregation there and had invited people to come to a meeting. And unbeknownst to him, there were these extremist Hindus that came to that meeting and were feeding information back to their superiors in law enforcement. And they were going to have this meeting. They put out the alert. They had these posters, and they wanted everybody to come. It was going to be like an old-fashioned lynching, And so the missionary church planter got word back to Hyderabad, to the headquarters, and Cheery sent out this email to the states and all over the world asking people to pray that God would protect this church planter and the whole Mission India ministry from exposure. And the next day, or the day that this rally was scheduled to happen, it was mysteriously canceled. It had the potential of not only putting that missionary in physical danger, but really destroying the 35 years of work that John DeVries and all those people have done there. And what an answer to prayer that was. And I think about all the times that we have prayed together for a loved one, or you have prayed with your loved ones for God to bring healing, deliverance. God answers in His own way. But God does hear every prayer. He loves us. What a great example Jesus was. And that's spoken of in this section. I think it's maybe day 10 here, or 12. The example of Christ, day 13, so the last 2 days. But it talks not only about our gospel reading today, where Jesus prayed all night, we just read, before He selected the 12 disciples. You got to believe, even though the gospel reading ended with the word traitor, referring to Judas Iscariot, who was the traitor, And I know people kind of joke about, well, even one of the 12 didn't make it, As if somehow Jesus made a bad decision.